Welcome to Mourning, a podcast where we share our experiences around letting go of grief and learn to move with grace through mourning. We are your hosts, Alyce Christina
and Crystal Lee, two friends who connected through yoga and movement and ultimately found a deeper connection over our own parental losses.
We share how our experiences have informed us to live our lives more authentically, boldly, and in the now so that you can do the same. We believe where there is pain, there is transformation.
From the loss of a loved one to change in a career, a heartbreak, identity shift, and many other forms of loss, we walk this path together.
To discover the light within the darkness, we recognize the joy within pain and invite you to dive in with us as we share in the hope, laughter, and lightness of the mourning journey.
Join us for stories, interviews, and conversations that connect us as we explore the universal experience of loss that invokes the becoming of one's true self.
And welcome to Mourning podcast. I'm your host, Alyce, and today we have very special guest co-host, a group session and conversation, continuing the conversation on the loss of community and specifically the Yoga One community here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Before I go into introductions, we're going to start in true Yoga One style and take some deep breaths together. We'll take 3. Everyone, deep breath in and out. Breath in. Awesome. We'll start with the introduction of Sylvia.
Hi, I'm Sylvia. I am from Charlotte and found Yoga One after moving from Beaufort, South Carolina. I had started a yoga practice there at a Baptiste style studio, and Yoga One kind of fell into my lap, even though it was in a far away part of town. And it turned out to be a much bigger part of my life than I would have ever expected. So that's my little short story.
Thank you. Lauren?
Yeah, my name's Lauren. I found Yoga One when I moved to Charlotte. I had started a yoga practice out in California and wanted to continue that. And I was sent over there by my friend Grace. And I practiced there for a while and then ended up working at Yoga One and practicing. So Yoga One became even more of my life, my job, and my community, and also where I practiced.
Ian?
Yeah, my name is Ian, and I began practicing at Yoga One. I think it was either 2007 or 2008. I came to the studio through having been a ballet dancer with North Carolina Dance Theater, now Charlotte Ballet, and I was in the second or third teacher training group at Yoga One and started working and teaching at the studio and taught there until it closed.
Kate?
My name is Kate Dullahan, and I found Yoga One by way of my roommate, I think either 08 or 09. And I'd had a yoga practice previously towards the end of college, and my friend Lori said, I think you will really love this place. And she had no idea how incredible and how impactful that place would become in my life.
Thank you. Well, welcome all. I'm so excited to have you here. I've seen some of you more than others, and regardless, yeah, this is a community, right? I feel like almost like this is the place. Yoga One was the place for me where I started to be fully me and fully allowing people to see who I was. And I just want to start the conversation on just diving deeper into what Yoga One was to all of us, what it facilitated, what it offered, to give listeners a deeper understanding of how and why we're sitting here together having this conversation.
Well, I'll chime in. I just remember coming to Yoga One and feeling like I had like stumbled upon this like secret society of really genuine, warm, welcoming human beings who were listening to me, looking me in the eye, having deep conversations without even knowing my first name, let alone my last name or where I was from or anything. It just was coming from the ballet world of like a very insular community of like living around and being with ballet dancers where our whole lives revolved around ballet, to come into this community of folks from all walks of life, races, backgrounds, economic status. Like it was just such a diverse community, and I felt like I really began to feel like Charlotte was home when I came upon Yoga One. And yeah, that was my initial, like, how it initially landed for me, and then it became, I mean, the hub of my entire life, really. Like my life, my social circle, my career, my livelihood, all revolved around Yoga One for many years.
Yeah, and I can chime in. I remember when I first started practicing at Yoga One and like going in, and everyone who worked there and practiced there just was having so much fun. And I remember thinking like I want them to be my friends. Like I want to be part of this, and like in a bigger way than just practicing, right? So when I did leave, my job, can't even remember the year, and applied for the front desk, and Shane and Barb hired me. Like I was like ecstatic. I was like, this is like a new chapter. I'm so excited. And I think even like Alyce, like you and I didn't even know each other, but we like planned to walk and meet each other like at the Harris Teeter or something, and went and did like
The
the
booty
booty
loop.
loop. Yeah.
The 24-hour
Yeah.
booty loop. We met at the Harris Theater with
And Amelia
Amelia,
was
and
like
we went and
4
met
years old.
Steph Lockhart, right?
Yes. Yes. And I like didn't, I barely knew you, you barely knew me, but it was just like, I could tell that it was just going to be a really big part of my life. And to what Ian said, like, I didn't really realize how big of a part it was going to be until, now looking back. But um, yeah, that was the beginning of something really special.
I'm having trouble like landing on one thing, and what I'm thinking mostly right now is what an incredible, I've used this 2 times, I've used incredible already. What an incredible experience it is to, like, I'm not Ian and I'm not Lauren, and like what you just said, I'm like, I get that. Yeah, yeah. Like I can totally see that happening. Or like, me too, me too, me too. Like it just, the connection and the like I think it was my husband that pointed out one time. I'm like, 3 years in, and I was telling a story about someone there, and he sincerely was like curious about this person, and it's like, where are they from, or like, where did they go to college or something, and I was like, I don't know, like like it had never occurred to me to ask like everyday transactional kind of questions, because like that's not what we're doing here. Like we get to skip that part when we're in this space, because there is so much more to get to than like, do you have a college degree? Like, which is great, right? But like, but I'm not here to find out what your job is. It's like, no, but like, what are you really up to? Like, what's really swirling around in your brain? Like, what have you put aside? Or like, what did you have to do to carve out the time to be here? Like, what, like the whole right now of it and the humanity of it is just something that is just purely magical and incapable of being replicated. Like, and so that's my full circle, is that like, that's why I'm just like I have so much to say that I can't encapsulate it just yet. But I'm listening, and other than imagining Ian in those white shorts, like front and center in the basement, don't get it twisted, guys. Like it was like, and then jump, just fast forward to like my life right now. Like I've gotten married and I've had children, and these people have come to my house and like seen my babies in my life. It's just like I mean, that place was a launching pad for so much richness that I still hold dear.
Yeah, it's funny because I relate to everything everyone said in different ways, and I had a yoga practice and I had a yoga community when I was in Beaufort. I got really involved with yoga during training for a marathon, and I got like so deep in it. I was like best friends with the owner of the studio, and she made like we signed up to go to Chicago to go meet Baron. We like I was in. I was like, give me all the Baptiste stuff, and I started teacher training, and that was still in Beaufort, and I freaking hated it. And I was like, this sucks. I hate yoga. I hate this place. This place isn't whatever I thought it was. And when I moved to Beaufort, like a year or two later, I was like, I didn't even practice. I was not even practicing yoga. And I looked it up. I guess I just wanted to take a class, and I went to the central location, and I immediately had that same feeling that y'all said. Like literally you walked in and you were just like, hey, you're here. Like we've been waiting for you. Where have you been? And I'll still remember, I think one of the moments that like when I started going more regularly, I went to one of Sally's classes, which at that point was like huge. And she had a cue for up dog where she said, put your thumbs by your nipples. And I was like, this is my kind of place. If we can say nipples in workout class, I am in 110%. So from that point on, it was crazy amazing. And then I was kind of like Lauren, where I was like, I want to be friends with all you people. So when I went to Costa Rica with Alyce and Ian and Bethany, I left that trip and I was like, I feel like I'm friends with celebrities. Like, I feel like these teachers are like the coolest people on earth. And I was so like amazed that these people liked me and they wanted to be my friend. And Ian and I were having funny jokes about queefing. How much are you editing this video, by the way?
No, that was good.
Oh no, I was about to chime in and say nipples. I mean, nipples is like tame for Sally. I remember push the bush.
So but explicit.
Oh my gosh. And it had, I mean, there was such a, I mean, that's something that was like, I mean, joking not aside, like the irreverence and the reverence for what we were doing was so like, it was like we got to be the whole spectrum of who we were in that space. There was nothing held back or, and it was like,
It wasn't like taking yourself too seriously, right? Like what they always said.
yeah, yeah,
I mean,
it
I remember when
was.
she said, put your thumbs by your nipples. And you could tell some people in the room were like, and she goes, we all have them. You know where they are. Just do it. I was like, hell yeah.
I think that with the like it was just the perfect balance. Like I've talked about this in the past. Like it was just the perfect, for a lack of a better word, balance of humanity, right? Where we were able to skip casualties, like the casualties of like, where do you live? What, like, I don't know, just the superficial. When you're asked, how are you? It's not, the answer is not good, because good is not a feeling, right? It was, how are you? Who are you? Yeah. And your why of like, and the permission to show up exactly as you were in humor, in sadness, in dishevelment. I know I've shared that when I came to Yoga One, I was in the midst of a divorce and a recently single mom, and my life outside of myself was in shambles. I was 30 years old living with my parents all of a sudden, right? And so, and then when I landed at Yoga One, there was no judgment around that. Whereas, like, my mom was going through a very hard time understanding who I was in that moment. I landed at Yoga One, and people were like, that doesn't define you. Who do you want to be? Who are you going to be? Right. And it's like, it became such a home, right? That like, I was, that I was like, great, I'm going to work here. I'm going to assist here. I'm going to teach here. I'm going to make friends here, not just friends, family. Like, and that truly is what it became. And I think some of you have spoken to this too, of like there was a palpable energy, right? And like, can we, I don't know, maybe dive into that a little. I think we've said a few nuggets of what that energy was. Like, was it the practice? Was it the leadership? Maybe it was just each person in and of themselves that made that community whole in that moment, potentially. But and it was also ever evolving. It was very fluid. It was very welcoming.
I think you kind of already, for me, you said it like the freedom to be, like however and whoever and whatever you are right at that moment. I remember the first thing that I remember like wailing about, I'll just jump right to that point. Like finding out, like when the reality of it like hit, I remember sobbing and just saying, where am I going to go? And I didn't mean to practice yoga. Like that was part of it, but like, where am I going to go? Like, where am I going to go to nap? Like, where am I going to go? Because I need somewhere to go. Where am I going to go to like smell the smell of feet and like it not even faze me? Like, where am I going to go to see people that are going to look at me and see me and just like, and that can be it. Like, where am I going to go to be exactly who I want to be and who I already am? And that's enough. Like, it was like back door, front door, basement stairs, like however you got in there at whatever year, whatever time of day, it was like there were no expectations. And that is the most liberating thing I think that a human can experience, is to walk into a building, a room, a place, and be surrounded by maybe like complete strangers. And it's like, what's up? Like that's it, like there's, and like whatever happens after that, it's just what is going to happen. Like there's just no expectation. And then all of the other stuff, like the physical practice and the friendships and like a lifetime of memories and the growth and the experience and the fucking awakening of self, like that's just the extra. Like that's just the bonus.
I really do think it's like the practice though. Like for me, like what got us to that point, what got me to that point of like come as you are was like what we were showing up to get on the fucking mat before I'll speak from I was showing up to get on the fucking mat before I was showing up for any like friendship or like social thing. Like that practice changed my fucking life. Like that, I remember the very first time I rolled out my mat at Yoga One, and my best friend Kara was with me, one of the other ballet dancers in the company, and she looked over at me at the end of the class. Christine Navarro had taught. She sang to us in Shavasana. I was sweat more than I ever had in my entire life. And we sat a 90-minute class because everything was 90 minutes back then. And she looked over, I remember she told me this later, and she was like, Ian, that first time I took you to Yoga One, like I remember looking over and being like, what just happened to him? Like I've known him since we were like 15, and something just clicked in him. And And I really do think like Baptiste yoga and the Baptiste methodology, not that those principles and truths and awakenings don't exist in other styles of yoga, but what we were doing was Baptiste yoga. And what got me to that place of being like, come as you are to every human being, whether I was in that space or on the dance floor somewhere or at Harris Teeter, like, was for me that like what we were doing on the mat. It was, and it wasn't just like the physical practice, it was like how and what and like was being taught. Like it was like a place to practice being a good human being. like like we were walking in those walls and changing our language and changing how we physically moved. We were changing how we looked at people in the eye, like the simplest things of being a human. We were practicing those things there.
Like I still like so much take away. I mean, yeah, like stuff like that, like looking people in the eye, like having conversations, pausing, like listening, like so many things that I wish I'd learned years and years before, but like has made me like I think like just a much more, I mean, a better human, a better, sibling, partner, you know, all across the board. Like just so many tools that we got that I think at the time I didn't even realize, right? I'm like, some of it I would kind of like roll my eyes at. I'm like whatever. But now I'm like, that shit is gold. Like just it's gold. Like I use it all the time.
Yeah, I was thinking because, like Ian said, the practice, because when I moved back to Charlotte, and I can't recall if I had already gone to Yoga One or not, but I had gone to another studio that will remain unnamed because I knew the owner. And I, to this day, I remember like walking in there and taking the class and walking out of there and being like, I don't fucking want to ever come back here. I don't, and I never felt like that with Yoga One. And it was a similar practice, similar sweat, similar heat, similar stuff. But it was like you could tell you were just another person at that studio, that they were just like, okay, membership here, class, move on, next, who's coming in now, instead of it being like, we actually appreciate you being here and we welcome you here. And I don't know why it felt like that, and I cannot put my finger on it even to this day. But it was it just felt completely different.
I remember just when Ian, when you're talking about the practice, like it was the first time I landed, and I went to practice, right? And it was often, I talked about it being in a previous episode, like it being a complement to my dance practice, right? Like going to sweat and get my body moving and doing these things. And it was the first time I allowed a teacher to look at me and saw past the perceived judgment I thought they were looking at me with. Right. And I was like, oh, wait, no, this person just wants to see me in my eyes. They're not looking at my body, or they're not looking at my butt, or how big my thighs are right now, or how perfect I'm doing something or not doing something. They just see me. And that was like, that gave me permission to start to work through the lens in which I was looking at the world, right? Whether I was looking at someone or looking at a situation or navigating a toddler or navigating my parents in that moment, like, and their judgments towards me. It was, yeah, it was definitely, and I think we spoke to that so much, and in the community, that like the physicality of the practice was the gateway. It was the opening and the access point to how we think, how we set the energy in the room, how we, like.
Yeah, and I think Yeah, I mean, the one of the reasons I mean, that people could, like, as Sylvia was speaking to, like, walk in the door and they were given space to, like, belong, was because so much of the work that we as a staff did to be clear in ourselves. I mean, like, I remember the first day I started working at Yoga One, and we had to go back in the tiny little yellow studio in the back of the original space, and we had a community meeting where we sat down, committed to making ourselves good, each other good, the world good, Yoga One good, all things good, and then, like, broke down the things in our lives where we were had to have a heart-to-heart confrontation, talk about core feelings and the, like, things that are challenging us in our lives, and had, like, work through them in front of other people. I was like, wait, I'm not just working at a yoga studio and, like folding towels and like doing laundry, and like we're gonna talk about our feelings and I have to do this in front of Jana? Like, what? Like yeah, so, like, a lot of that, like, uh yeah, a lot of that space holding was because the people that worked at Yoga One were doing the work to be clear and to be able to welcome people without, like you were saying, Alyce, like the way that you were seeing the world change, how you were able to look at someone and see past any things that in the past you might have judged them for, and just welcome that, like, to quote Michelle, that child of God who's walking into your space, um like, that wasn't small work to be able to, like, greet people with that genuine, like, hey, like, oh, I love that, Silvio, we've been waiting for you. It's like that kind of, like you're special and we want you here. um like, because to have that genuinely, like, um yeah, it takes some work to let go of the, like, filters that are right on the surface so often.
I think also, just going off a little bit of what Sylvia said, is, I've gone into a number of yoga studios in my life, and there's just something that about Yoga One that can, in my mind, I have not seen it yet, be replicated. Like that feeling of belonging, even when, like, my first time in to Yoga One, like, to, the day that it closed down and I taught my last class, like, just, there's something so special about Yoga One. Yes, I think it's definitely the methodology, the practice. But I think more importantly, it's just like the community that we created, and the connection and the growth that, I mean, I think a lot of us on, this call now, like, had together, or at some point, witnessed in each other. That is just so remarkable and so special that, like, I don't know if I'll ever find a community quite like it again. Like, now go to Metabolic and I go to Kali, but, like, I don't feel that same sort of connection or community like I felt at Yoga One.
I think
I think that, ooh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna tack on to the end of that. I think that was a big awakening for me, and part of my grieving process of this loss is realizing, like, or when I got to the place that I realized I've I'm not gonna find this, right? Like, that part is done. So right now, like, it's not about getting over it, it's about how am I moving forward. So moving forward, what is available to me and what can I seek out. And it was hard for me at first to reconcile, kind of in my brain, like, but that's not Yoga One, but that's not the yoga that I do, or this isn't, like, this isn't it, and then when I got to the place that I could, like, uh, I won't say give that up. Like, it still kind of, like, rings right in the back of my head. But when I accepted the fact that, like, I'm not finding that because that's not here anymore. So from right here, then where do I go?
I'm just imagining Kate going into, like, studios all over Charlotte. walking out and being like, this isn't it. Close your doors.
This
Fix
isn't it.
this.
This isn't it. You're not too far off. I'm going to be honest. The emotions on the mat after Yoga One came out a lot differently than they did inside of Yoga One. That's another set of growth.
I mean, that's what's screaming in my head a lot of times. It's like, no, it's not it. Yeah.
Or it's beside Lauren, like punching a bag that has nothing to do with the mat. But I defined what I knew I needed, and maybe it looked different.
Yes. And I think that's a beautiful segue to, the closing was so sudden, right? Like, did you allow yourself the space to grieve the loss? And like, what did that look like? What did it feel like? And as we talk about here on the morning call, like, we know grief is not linear, right? It's not a one and done thing. Like, how does it continue to show up for you? And yeah, to what you were saying, Kate, like, what are we choosing to like bring forward, right? From essentially, like, without labeling it, we have the legacy of Yoga One, right? On our hearts, in our practices, in if we're still teaching and how we teach. What are those ways in which let's go back to the first question. How did you grieve?
Whew. Well, well, first, I mean, shock was I mean, like just the closing in and of itself. It was a wild, full circle moment for me the day that we found out, because I got a text message from a friend, and this friend was the person who took me to my very first Yoga One class. And I hadn't talked to this person in quite some time. We were still friends, but just orbiting farther out from each other. And I got a text from her saying, with a screenshot of the email that went out to the students and clients of Yoga One, that said Yoga One to close. And she said, like, hey, I hope you're okay. Let me know if you need anything. And I literally thought it was a joke, because Yoga One to close was not the language of Yoga One. I, for a long time, wrote the newsletter and held the voice of Yoga One and knew how we spoke, and that was not the way Yoga One talked. And so, yeah, that, like, the initial shock of it was like was something in and of itself to process, because, like I said, it was a shock, and then I thought it was a joke, and then I realized it was real, and then I had to teach on Zoom that night. And so that the initial shock was like just so sudden, like you said, Alyce, and unexpected. So that was something to process in and of itself. The grieving of the closing was also exacerbated by the fact that we were in the middle of the global pandemic, and I couldn't be with the people that I wanted to grieve with in the way that we might otherwise be together in a lot of things. So, like, it was like grieving was unique at that time. I remember one specific way that I grieved was that during the pandemic, I would go to the Dilworth location up on the rooftop there, over to the side, and practice by myself. Uh, and so meditate there. I cried almost every single time I was there. And the physical practice was one way that I grieved, was like being in my body, like at the Dilworth space, and moving and being with the feelings and the realization that I was never going to have that place again.
I mean, I can share briefly. I think that, I remember teaching, I taught the very last class at Dilworth, and I remember putting up the sign that said, like, closed for 2 weeks, like, see you soon. And of course, at that point, like nobody knew what was going to happen. Nobody knew that we were going to be in this like just massive, world changing pandemic. Um, and I also remember when I was quite literally helping my brother and Tiffany move a washer and dryer out of Chantel's house. Um, that I got the call from Daniel that we've decided to close Yoga One, and I found out as a manager, maybe not even 30 minutes before everybody else found out. So I was completely blindsided, and then I was fully inundated with phone calls, text messages, and like coming to me for answers, and I had none. Like I had absolutely none, and I was in full shock, and I was, sad. Really, I think it was like shock before anything. But as time passed, I feel like the loss of Yoga One is so different for me. I think that most of us on this call probably have lost somebody or a pet or something that we really loved, and like that kind of loss is so like finite. Like it's so it's so, I mean, finite's the only word I can think of. So it's a really almost linear, what's going to happen in the grieving process. Everything looks different, but you're grieving. And the loss of Yoga One was really different for me. It was almost like, I don't know, this like ambiguous loss, like, cause I still had this like hope that like I would find something like this, or that we would create something like this again, and like clinging to that. And I think that like the Yes Collective was part of that, like clinging to this community. Like, how can we make this continue? Like, how can we keep this? Because nobody wants to lose this. So that hope, and like also on the other side, knowing like that things have profoundly changed forever. Like that there's a big chance, like a large chance that I'll never get that back. And so this just like back and forth of, trying to figure out like to keep the hope or to grieve this loss was kind of a back and forth for me for a while. So it was an interesting type of loss in the, the loss that I've experienced in my life.
So well said, Lauren. I so relate to that back and forth, like loss and hope. Thank you for articulating that.
Yeah, through this whole thing, I always just kind of like laugh at myself because I'm like, okay, I literally just went there for yoga. I'm not a teacher. I wasn't a manager. I didn't do anything. I didn't even fold the eye towels. Like, I didn't do whatever the energy exchange, whatever they called it. I never did any of that. And so when it closed, my biggest fear, it wasn't the yoga. I mean, it was the yoga, but I was like, are these people still going to want to be my friend? Are these people still going to be a part of my life when we're no longer not forced to be together, but have a reason to be together? And I had this like fear that I would disassociate from a lot of people that I had become very close with, which thankfully has not happened. But I think that was my first thought was, oh shit, people that I've really come to love that are part of my family, I feel like we won't, it's like if your house burns down almost and you're like, this is where we gathered for Thanksgiving every year or Christmas or whatever, and you don't have that house anymore. You're like, well, where are we going to gather that feels the same? And that was where I felt different as a practitioner versus someone who worked there.
I think it's so valid. And I don't think I've ever, you articulated that very well, Sylvia. Thank you. Just remembering what I experienced too, of like, I don't know. I think it was so deeply rooted in me that I think fighting to keep the community together was so much at the forefront of my head. I don't think I recognized the the fear that people who just showed up to practice experienced, right? Because I was like so deeply, for my own sake too, trying to hold on to keep us connected, right? And Ian said it beautifully of like this friend that took you to your first yoga class, like, and your orbits were just spinning outside. Like, that's what I've really experienced on the other side, outside of the shock, is that just because we're now orbiting differently, we're practicing in different places, has that doesn't change my love for the community that I have, right? And I don't fear that if I needed to call anyone, right? Or even just running into someone that I haven't seen in, gosh, what, 4 years now? That there's not like that instant, like just heart to heart connection of like being able to look someone in the eyes and being like, hey, I'm still here. Come find me. And I genuinely say that because I am still here, and I want to share. And it's not, again, not the same experience. It never will be the same experience. Yet we have access to share that energy again.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I know that, your experience, Sylvia, you felt, as you say, just a practitioner. Like, that's a fear I had as well. Like, I remember, during the pandemic when all of it was happening, I no longer had a job. So I was like, my family was out at the lake. So I went out to the lake, and I remember, my, group of friends, like being together, and me kind of like seeing that slip away a bit, and feeling really like sad about that as well. And like looking back, like my life has, I'm no longer a yoga teacher. I um, live a very different life than I did then. However, like, as you can see, like these people are, y'all are all still in my life in different ways, but I genuinely think as soon as I see you, as soon as we're together, like we do pick up right where we left off. And there is this, again, like there's this thing that we shared, this space that we shared, that we know about and that we always have. And I mean, I just think that these friendships in this community, like genuinely, would just last a lifetime.
Miss Kate D, do you have anything you want to share?
Well, to go back to the very beginnings, like, what did you do when you found out? I drove right to Ian's house and rolled out my mat in his driveway, for one. Um, and, but other than like literally, I do remember it's like trying to access like a core memory. Like the loudest thing that's like pinging in my brain right now is like, I remember being like, um, Sally's like she like, not that she jumped to a conclusion, but I remember being like, well, that was quick. Like, this is only going to be 2 weeks. Like, how? But then in that same thought, I'm like, she's smart though. She made this place, and maybe she's on to something. So I had this like duality of like, and at the same time, I'm raising two small kids at home. Um, there is like this ripple effect through the entire dynamic of our family. I'm adjusting and like trying to navigate like how much time, like, this is kind of ridiculous, but it's like, um Alyce, you're the only other parent on here, right? So it's like this like immediately, like for me as a mom, it's like, okay, how much time can I give myself to grieve? I'm going to put that in this box. And then I've got to figure out how to explain this to my kids, like what's going on. I got to figure out how to function in the best possible way with my husband. Like what, like my, the functioning of my household changed like the next day. And so in the moments that I would allow myself to, what I was calling at the time, grieve, I mean, that's when it would all come out. Like that, I remember like rolling out my mat, even in my bathroom, just to get away to shut the door. And then and it was like, I waffled in this like denial and anger, truly, for longer than I would have liked. Because all I wanted to do was like get out of this place that now I'm stuck. And that was the one place that I always got to go, and now I can't even go there. So now I got to lock myself in the bathroom. Like it was ugly. And I had to like check myself and be like, okay, so it's going to stay ugly if you let it stay ugly for you. And like look in the mirror and like you got to like feel what you have to feel. And so then like this ironic twist, it's like, oh, all of the things that I learned how to do for myself at this place, like I've got this whole suitcase full of tools and ways to like really get to know myself and feel my feelings. Now it's like, this is actually the highest call to access what I've learned from there. And again, like move forward. And it took me a long time. Yeah, I'll end right there for now. This is where like the editing people come in. But
No, I love that. I think that that is so important, and thank you for sharing that because it and other people can chime in. It's, there was such a level of frustration. I think that we all felt, right? And then compartmentalizing how we operate, because it wasn't just the loss of, we weren't just experiencing the loss of our physical yoga studio home community. We were in a sense losing each other in this global, we were losing the ways that we were humanly supposed to connect globally through the pandemic, right? So we were already navigating so much, and then we lose the one thing that like everyone was still showing up to virtually, making the best out of it. And then all of a sudden it was gone, right? And so, and in my experience, and I've talked about this before, is that, right, like it was what, anybody remember the exact date? June 22nd, 24th, something like that. My mom died a month later, right? And I mean, I remember, Kate, when you jumped on and were introducing yourself, I got teary-eyed because I was like, I know we've seen each other since then. And I literally went to your house. Like, Ian, we showed up in your driveway. I think that was the first time we had literally physically seen you in weeks, because you really withdrew, and we're taking it very seriously. And I think we were all taking it seriously. And, but you chose to be secluded for a good period of time. And so that was the first time I saw you. And then Kate, I don't know why we gathered at your house, but there was a group of us. It was Yoga One people. And it was after Yoga One had closed, and I had come from my parents' house, and we had just gotten my mom home from the hospital. Oh, it was their 50th wedding anniversary. And I had served them dinner. And I was like, oh my gosh, where do I go? And I don't know if you called or someone else was like, hey, we're at KT's house. And so I went, and I just remember having this feeling of like relief, but I was also very confused. But I like, because I was surrounded by the people that like made up the internal energy of what Yoga One what was held within those walls, I felt safe. I felt seen. Yeah, it was a full gamut of experiences. And then I know, Ian, you said that you wanted to practice. It's like after Yoga One closed and then I lost my mom, I couldn't practice. I didn't want to practice. I didn't want to feel those feelings. It was too much for a long time. Anybody else?
Yeah, speaking of the practice, like Kate mentioning, like that's where I went to process like what was happening, and I couldn't go there, and I think like there, like the literal like going to the studio to practice is a big part of it, and I'm also reminded, like, I mean, like this podcast being about mourning, and like our bodies are physiologically wired to down regulate when we're with each other. Like the physical practice of being in a room, moving and breathing together takes our nervous system down. And I'm just reminding myself that, like, oh, we didn't have, like, I remember the magic that it felt like when I practiced with other people after 2 years of not having done that. Like Zoom can do a lot, but
Oh
Zoom
my
can't
gosh.
do.
Even in
Yeah,
masks,
yeah,
do you even remember that? God, like at Kali, like sweating and that, I was like, oh my God. Oh, but worth it. Like, geez.
right. But like it just reminds me that like we didn't have that, like like just being with in proximity to other humans, like we grieve together, and that was something that was unique at that time too. Like I wasn't with my friends, and I didn't have the practice in that way, and the or didn't have the place in that way, but like the moving and breathing with each other, like that, I hadn't really thought of that part of like mourning being missing at that time, was just being in a room with other people, not having to talk, being able to like feel without explaining or understanding something. Like that was, I mean, I was doing that on my own at the rooftop over there through tears, and I wasn't surrounded by other people, other bodies in a human experience. So that was unique in the grieving process.
And I think that's like one of the important things of like to recognize, and one of the missions of Morning Call is that, like, you know, to not be cliche, but we're better together, right? And our society does teach us that we're supposed to deal with loss individually, and we're supposed to grieve in 3 to 5 days and then go back to work like everything's fine, right? Or pick up. That's why it was just such a, for me, it was an invaluable moment because I didn't have to go to work, and experiencing the loss of Yoga One and then my mom back to back was like, I didn't have to go anywhere. Like literally all I had to do was like be right. But then I was like, but I'm a mom and I'm a partner, and I couldn't show up for them because I could hardly show up for myself. Right. So it was a very interesting experience to have.
I think you're so right. It's like we're, told to that, you know, we like ourselves alone, like can work through this, or um we're in it by ourselves, like so many things kind of preach that. But I read something recently, and I don't know where it was, but like human beings are supposed to be part of like a tribe, like a community, and that's like really what we had. And I feel like that's why we all obviously feel the way we feel. We were supported. We went there to heal. We went there for connection, for growth, for so many things. And you know sometimes you see the person that goes for the first time and like feels it, like your friend Ian, like that saw the shift and the change. And it's because, I mean, I do really feel, yes, it's a practice, but you're also to go to baptize like something bigger than yourself, like you're you're just part of something. And I like human beings are supposed to be part of a tribe, a community, and be able to lean on each other for help. And that's what we had. And that's what we still have. It's just not in this physical space of Yoga One.
Yeah, so beautifully said. And I was going to, um, yeah, just prompt like final thoughts, right? About like what this legacy of what we shared, experienced from Yoga One of Yoga One? How does it still live in you? How do you choose to carry it forward in your day-to-day life? And any final thoughts of like ways in which this grieving process, this loss of community still shows up?
Well, I miss having conversations like this on the daily. I mean, that's one. I miss having like those deep kind of like even like everyone's spoken to like the getting kind of past like the riffraff, like the pleasantries, like getting to the like core of it all. Like I really do miss that because there was no fluff. There was very little fluff, I think, in the conversations that we had at Yoga One. So I miss that on just like a very uh, basic level. I mean, so many things I miss about Yoga One, but I think just having
And
this
not basic
conversation,
because, yeah, it's not basic
no,
because that is not, you don't often walk into a place now and I'm like, don't really ask me how I'm doing unless you really want to know. Right? Unless you're like, because it's like, and it's like, and I choose that, and I say that because like, I don't want that superficial. I want to know how you are. I want to like I want to create that sense of community and energy for people, a sense of belonging in a way in which that makes a difference, not only for me, but for anyone.
Yeah, I mean, so many ways I carry forward the legacy of Yoga One. I mean, I teach yoga and I teach in the way that I learned to teach at Yoga One. Um, I lead trainings with the methodology, not just Baptiste methodology, but the methodology that we developed through practicing Baptiste yoga at Yoga One. Um, and I mean, I say and a lot. You won't nary find a but in my language. Um,
every time I say but,
uh,
I like get triggered. I'm like, and,
yeah.
and.
Gotta live that and life.
Gosh, I think Kate spoke something to like the nowness of it, or something that came up a little earlier, and I think some of that, uh, how do I do it how am I doing what I'm doing in the now, like what, like the forward moving energy, because I learned that so much at Yoga One, the like coming from the swirl of story and like the things that are occurring in life, and like what is like right now I feel like that practice is a daily part of my, yeah, life.
I mean, I think that Yoga One is, yeah, I mean, like for me, a lot of times I can see it come up in daily life, just like in the language that I use, how I communicate with others, how I can, I mean, I think that, and I said this earlier, but like just the tools that we all were given in whether it be teacher training or the practice or just being with each other and learning from each other, just the tools that we had to just talk and communicate and have like good conversations, like effective. Um, and like I'll never forget, like it's like you don't manage people, you manage conversations. And that is something that I think about often.
There's a big shout out to our teachers and mentors because that's actually light year leadership.
Is it? Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
And we got Suzanne through Barron, so
Yeah, we did. But again, it's effective and essential, right? And it's part of, I think, once you are aware of it, you I think we have all experienced how effective it is in our own lives. Why not share it? Like why not keep that moving forward?
yeah, and also the legacy. I mean, like I carry the legacy and like seeing people out and at Harris Teeter, and it's sparking somebody's eye. I think Alyce, in the episode where you brought up Yoga One, and your experience of loss through it. You mentioned like someone seeing you at Harris Teeter and not knowing, or somewhere, maybe it wasn't Harris Teeter, but seeing you and not quite remembering where they knew you from, and like that happens so often. And even teaching yoga now, I see people who ask me about Yoga One or have a memory or something that they want to share, and those special moments um, are a way of continuing to mourn and remember and celebrate what was. And also there's something so, I mean, it's bittersweet, and it's like, gosh, it's so good to know that won't happen again, because it was once in a lifetime. I mean, it was Yoga One. Like, it's not happening again. Like,
I'll just say that, I mean, I've obviously continued with a yoga practice. It's felt very, not forced, but definitely not as easy. I obviously have gotten to reconnect back now that you're teaching, and so trying to get back into that swing of things, because again, you teach the type of yoga I like, and you weave the stories and the lessons in through the practice, and I think that's one of the parts that I think about. I'm like I love leadership programs and things like that, but like this was it was like subliminal. And so when I'm like in the midst of like ready to kill myself because I'm in a position that I hate, in a pose that I hate, but then someone starts telling me a story, and it lands in some way during that one little moment, it just sinks into you without really knowing. And so I think that's part of why I miss a lot of it. And so I just still try to capture it wherever I can and wherever I go in a practice. So, I mean, in essence, I really just need all you people just in my ear throughout the day as I make back at work and back decisions personally to be like, find your true north. I need someone to tell me to ground my feet or something, all those things that I forget day to day that were always just kind of subliminally brought to me on a day-to-day basis at Yoga One. So,
I'll say one thing. I think that I lean more into I love being surprised by what is in me from this place, like as a gift from this place. And when I notice, like, well, one favorite thing I haven't done yet is the like I do that, like I won't even realize I'm having a moment, and that like it doesn't even phase my kids anymore. Like no one comes to check on me. Like it's just um, yeah, like the deep, loud, just okay, take two, we're back. Like yeah, it's the things that have become like woven into my being that I didn't necessarily seek out, but I was always willing to let them sink in, and for them to come up when I'm not planning for them to, when it's just when I really feel like it's part of me, and I get to attribute that to the experiences that I had with the people and the place, and my own personal willingness to like show up and to not take anything about my life and myself for granted anymore, and to like really discover what else there is. And then to see that after this place has now been, what is it? It's almost like 2025, guys. Like, and it's just like, right. Like you can still just grab it out of the bag, like I can see myself swinging the back door open and like running in with 2 minutes. Yes. Yes. Yes! That is a past thing in my life, but I'm not telling you what it is. Uh, but
Oh
so
five
like
one nine
that
six two.
Oh my gosh.
so that and like the way that I talk to my husband and the way my like relationships function, and the flip side of that, like being able to identify when I'm not in alignment with who I am, and being able to like and not hold myself to an expectation or a standard, but just to be like, all right, this isn't it right now. It's the little, it's not like the one thing that I take away. It's just like, oh, thank you for transforming who I am as a human being, and like, and letting me have access to all of that forever. Um, that's it for me.
It was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Sylvia, Lauren, Kate, and Ian, for being here, being a part of this conversation, and hopefully an ongoing conversation, right? There's many other stories to share, experiences to be shared in this vast large community, and it had many installations, right? There wasn't just Yoga One Central. There was Hawthorne, and there was Dilworth, and there was University for a short period of time. And right, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that one.
I truly hated
Right,
going out there and opening.
I know. And that's like where I taught yeah, Yoga One for the first time, right? They were all very special places and moments in time. I feel like we should end in a Yoga One style off of Kate D. A big breath in, Om. I was gonna do okay. Maybe we'll do three things. All right, take a big breath in, and then Lions breath it out. Big sigh. Uh, right now, I feel. Go for it. Right now, I feel.
Right now, I feel love.
Right now, I feel connected.
Right now, I feel happy.
Right now, I feel joy.
Right now, I feel grounded. Should we own? Deep breath in, hands at Anjali Mudra. Ah.
Namaste.
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 Hey.
Thank you for joining us on the Morning Call podcast. Stick around for a few more shares from members of the Yoga One community and their experiences around community loss.
Hello, this is Tori Becker, and I wanted to share a little bit about my experience with Yoga One and, um, of course, the loss of it and what that felt like, but also so many gains. Yoga One came into my life right when I was at a point of a lot of change. Things in my life were changing, and now that I kind of reflect back on it, it's funny to think about because I'm not really sure if things in my life were changing so much for the fact that they were just naturally changing, or if my newfound home at Yoga One impacted a lot of that change. Yoga One provided this brand new atmosphere of growth for me, beginning as just growth physically, practicing, feeling stronger, feeling more confident in my body, feeling more aware of my body. And then that kind of shifted into this new confidence of mentality and what I felt like I was able to do, and putting myself out there in new ways that I had not before. I mean, diving right in and wanting to do assistant training, going home and getting so excited about thinking about teaching kids yoga and writing an entire summer camp curriculum in my journal when I had never even had a class that taught me how to teach yoga or kids yoga in any way. But it's just like I had this new springboard of possibility when I started my regular practice inside those orange walls. And it was this new community that I started opening up to after practicing for a little while, you know, the feeling of looking or first being greeted at the door by whoever it was that was working the front desk, feeling, you know, happy, feeling like I wanted to engage with them, moving into the classroom, the teacher engaging with you. I just felt seen in a way maybe that I wasn't in my daily life. And then that started to flow into noticing who was beside me on their mat, who was in the classroom with me. Um, and that led to a lot of new friendships that are my current friendships that will be lifelong. And it just was this brand new community that shifted my life. There was a lot of growth inside those walls on my own, but also together. And it is nothing that I have ever experienced um, in any other realm of my life. And I wonder if I will ever experience that kind of space again. It was there for me right when I needed it. And then all of a sudden, I remember the moment that it was gone. I was at the grocery store, and my partner, Kirsten, ran up to me with her phone, and she had gotten a text message from one of her friends that said that they were closing down. And I was in the checkout line, and I was like, no, this can't be right. Of course I would know. And walking outside, starting to text and call and finding out that everybody was just finding out about it at the same time. And it was this like just sick feeling in my stomach, which is just so funny because all of a sudden finding out that this place that had been my home for the past 5 or 6 years was no longer, I was confused and um, like I just didn't know what to do or where to go. And normally my way that I would make that problem better is by going to Yoga One. So it was a very strange feeling. It was beautiful in the sense of the way that the community pulled together, um, you know, trying to help everybody to work through what they were going through, process feelings together, process emotions and thoughts, and having Zoom calls, having gatherings, which were a little bit more difficult considering it was in the midst of COVID one. Everybody was, um, you know, homebound, and yet we still met for a last practice in the driveway of one of our good friends and fellow teachers, and moved and cried and just were together as a community. And that's the legacy of Yoga One, and what I will always have with me is the community, the strength in knowing like when to say yes and when it's okay to be a no, and using the word and instead of but, not putting blocks on things, allowing there to be this openness and flow, and to practice breathing at any point during the day. All day it's happening mindlessly, and to put mindful thoughts into the breath that's going in and out can change the course of your day, as well as being able to have the beautiful community that Yoga One created for so many different people, and know that that can be that can continue to live on. And I'm so grateful for everything that Yoga One brought into my life, even though it was an abrupt ending. And yes, there were moments of feeling helpless and confused, and such a big loss for so many people. It still continues to shape my life every day. Still haven't found another yoga home, just because I think the expectations are so high that nothing has ever really felt like home again. And I will continue looking, because I know that that space will eventually pop up, and I look forward to it when it does.
Hello, all. This is Crystal here, co host of the Morning Call podcast. I couldn't join this lovely discussion. I had a scheduling conflict, and so I wanted to send this voice note about my experience with Yoga One. My yoga journey began, over 20 years ago, really during college. I was sort of doing yoga haphazardly as really just another form of exercise initially. Not very consistently, and it wasn't until 2009, really, that I had a back injury from a fall that I basically was instructed by a doctor to start yoga more regularly, and do it in terms of, stretching to heal my back, which I did for a long time, and yoga really was instrumental in physical healing and still is to this day. But even back then in 2009, it may have not been until 2010, but I stepped into the walls of the old Central Avenue location of Yoga One, and just like everyone has talked about so far, really was transformed by even that very first experience. I mean, just the energy, like Alyce mentioned, was palpable in there. The love and openness I was greeted with. There's nothing like it, like everyone has said so far. But in all honesty, even then, I was still just doing yoga for the physical asanas for years and years. I mean, I loved the energy I felt there, welcomed by so many of the teachers and other students, obviously. But to me, I was really there for healing myself physically, and yoga as a physical practice. And then it was in 2017 when my dad died, which is, why we're here for this podcast, that my practice really changed into mental and emotional, and so many practices off the mat that are related back to my practice. And I would say that even though between 2009 and 2017, I mean, I'm notorious for kind of being a, quote, yoga whore, if you will, around the Charlotte market. I kind of dip my toe in a lot of various studios. There was just nothing like Yoga One, no matter where I went. And after losing my dad, that energy that is so palpable, or was so palpable at Yoga One, I was really desperate for. I wanted that sense of community, sense of love, sense of belonging, after such a loss. And so I was drawn more and more to Yoga One. And then, it was just 3 short years later in the pandemic that it closed so suddenly. And I'll never forget getting that email that it was closing. And there was grief for me, obviously, but my Yoga One story really is related to the grief of losing my dad, and how Yoga One was instrumental in helping me to deepen my practice on an emotional, mental, and spiritual level past the physical, and really know I mean, there's other studios that focus on those elements, but I just think that Yoga One, there was such a natural ability and natural vibes there, if you will, for those elements. And I will forever be grateful to Yoga One for pushing me past my physical practice. So thank you to everyone on this call. Thank you for all the other Yoga One teachers, the community, the students. I am forever grateful.
Yoga One was and is, the whole community, because for me, you guys are the essence of it. That palpable feeling you were talking about in your email or your text is exactly what I carried with me, is this this coming together, this love, this support, and also everybody being like there and finding their own paths, but being able to come back together at the studio. That was amazing, having that space. And then when we moved, it was kind of tumultuous the time that we moved, and but Yoga One was always there. It wasn't the place I carried with me, it was all of you. So I have, pieces of Yoga One all over, not just like the interior of my house, but within me, who I am as a teacher today. I tell Michelle that all the time. Took that 8:30 a.m. class, and, a few weeks later, I'm working at the front desk. So lots of different versions of myself I recognize from being at Yoga One. And it's all kind of led up to this moment. So I'm nothing but grateful. I know that it was incredibly jarring for everybody who was still in Charlotte. I was 1 degree away, but it still hurt very much. And it made me want to run back to Charlotte and be with everybody and, stop it from happening somehow. So there was a grieving process there for sure. A lot of nostalgia, followed by a lot of like gathering of photographs and posting and, talking to friends. It was and then immediately people went into action, and y'all created, oh my gosh, I know the name. Anyway, you started doing weekly yoga classes online. It was freaking brilliant. So that is the spirit of Yoga One. I carry that with me. I love you all. This is probably the most long-winded and likely unusable piece of material that you have probably gotten. Love you, baby. Bye. Thank you for joining the Mourning Call podcast. Our intention is that you found a nugget of hope, inspiration, connection, or all of the above.
If you seek to dive deeper with the Mourning Call community, email us, subscribe to our page, leave a review, and fill out our survey.
We want to hear your stories and widen the conversation to support and empower our grief experiences as we collectively become our true selves.
Find us and subscribe on all streaming platforms, YouTube, and at Mourning Call Podcast on Instagram. You can also email us at morningcallpodcast@gmail.com.
This podcast was edited by Alexis Carrasquillo from Familia Creative Media.